Hey guys, tonight we're heading into the desert. Not just any desert, this one's vast, sun-bleached, and entirely unforgiving. You're walking across scorched Persian earth where sandals melt if you stand still too long, and your water skin feels more like a sauna. The air vibrates with dry heat, cicadas hum a lazy death tune, and every mirage looks suspiciously like an oasis filled with popsicles. You're sweating through your tunic, regretting every life decision that led to this point. And yet somehow you're promised ice at the end of this road. Yes, ice, the kind that cracks under your teeth and numbs your lips. In a time when camels were the delivery trucks and air conditioning involved fanning yourself with a palm leaf, someone in ancient Persia figured out how to not only make ice in winter, but keep it frozen until summer. And not just for survival, but for the sheer decadence of dessert. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening somewhere warm or even chilly, drop your location and local time in the comments below. I love seeing where in the world you're relaxing with me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're trudging across Persia around 500 BCE, your sandals kicking up fine yellow dust that tastes like burnt toast. The road to the city of Yazd stretches ahead, a pale thread winding through mountains and flat, endless nothing. Occasionally, you pass a caravan. A few camels swaying like sleepy ships on a baked ocean. The travelers wear long tunics and thicker cloaks than you'd expect, more for blocking sand than keeping warm. They're also covered in a fine sheen of y-did-I-leave-the-house regret. You're thirsty, you're hot. You're rethinking your enthusiasm for ancient engineering, but then you see it. Rising in the distance, as if someone planted a giant beige beehive in the middle of nowhere, is a structure unlike anything else on this dusty trail. It glows slightly golden in the fading sun, smooth, curved, and deliberate. No windows, no doors visible from this side. Just a silent, stoic dome that seems immune to the very concept of heat. Congratulations, you found your first Yakhchāl, literally translated as ice pit. It's a refrigerator. But not the kind humming in your kitchen. This one is older than Jesus, taller than your apartment building, and built entirely without electricity, plastic, or artificial coolants. And yes, inside, there's probably still ice. You circle around it cautiously. The base is wide, maybe 10 to 15 meters across, tapering up to a round point like a Hershey's kiss made of mud. There's a small entrance on the north-facing side, always north, for less sunlight exposure. Cool air wafts from the opening, you swear it. You can almost feel it tugging at your sweat-drenched tunic. It smells faintly of clay, dates, and ... Is that saffron? You step inside. Instantly, the heat lifts, not like walking into an air-conditioned mall, but like ducking into a cave during a desert hike. Sudden, surprising relief. The interior is dim, the walls thick and smooth, gently curving inward. It's not cold exactly, but it's at least 10 degrees cooler than outside, which, frankly, makes it feel like paradise. And if it's winter, you'd be stepping into an ice vault. You run your fingers along the wall. The surface is rougher than it looks, made of a waterproof, heat-resistant mortar called sarouge, a blend of sand, clay, egg whites, yes, egg whites, lime, ash, and goat hair. Sounds like something you'd use to patch up a broken kayak, but it works. It's still here, after 2,500 years, holding in the chill like it's hoarding a secret. Historians still argue whether these Yakhchāls were public utilities, royal luxuries, or sacred storage for religious rituals. Some believe they were reserved for elite households or ceremonial use. Others say they were common enough that even middle-class Persian families could store perishables. The truth is probably somewhere in between because, well, humanity has never been great at sharing ice cream. You settle into a niche carved into the inner wall, your back finally cooling against the stone. You can almost hear echoes of ancient workers muttering about brick shortages and the blistering sun. Maybe one of them dropped their trowel right where you're sitting. And in that moment, you realize something. Someone built this for the future. They stacked mud and dreams, not just to survive, but to live better, to eat better. To open a sealed door in July and pull out a bowl of shaved ice soaked in grape syrup. They looked the desert dead in the eye and said, "You will not melt my dessert." But don't get up yet, there's a lot more to see. This is just the dusty threshold of the world's oldest ice machine. Next, you'll learn how they filled it. Spoiler alert, it starts with snowmen and ends with camel caravans full of popsicles. You're crouched in the shadow of the Yakhchāl, still feeling the cool seep through your robe when the wind shifts. A distant clatter rides the breeze, wooden wheels creaking, men shouting, and the occasional grunt of something large and grumpy. You squint into the horizon just as a long line of carts crests the dunes. No, you're not hallucinating from heatstroke. You're witnessing a genuine ice delivery in ancient Persia. You shuffle closer, the caravan creaks to a halt near the Yakhchāl, oxen snort and stamp. Men in dust-covered tunics hop down, pulling aside rough wool blankets from the back of the carts to reveal a glittering prize blocks of ice, packed in layers of straw and wrapped in thick cloth. How did they get it here? Let's rewind. You're now standing beside a shallow canal or possibly a wide basin carved from compacted earth. It's winter. Yes, winter in the desert is a thing. In fact, Persian highlands and elevated plateaus regularly dip below freezing at night. And that, my friend, is when the real magic happens. By day, workers pile water into these shallow pools maybe a finger deep, nothing more. By night, the temperature drops low enough to freeze the thin layer. Come dawn, the crew returns and carefully scrapes the ice sheets off, stacking them like cold crepes. It's backbreaking work. The pools need to be refilled. The ice, layered, packed, hauled, repeat nightly. But eventually, they build up enough supply slabs upon slabs of desert-made ice ready for the Yakhchāl's belly. They transport it quickly. Even in winter, sunshine doesn't mess around here. The fastest routes are mapped. Timing is everything. You imagine ice couriers developing rivalries like today's pizza guys. You got here with less melt than that guy, show off. A few ice chunks crack as they're unloaded. The men win its precious cargo. Ice isn't just refreshing. It's expensive, valuable, it's power. Historians still debate how large-scale this process was. Were there state-controlled operations with quotas and guards? Or was it more grassroots villagers organizing communal ice runs like PTA bake sales with more frostbite? Some scrolls suggest royal oversight. Others hint at entrepreneurial families turning winter into a business model. But what's not debated is the astonishing fact that these people millennia ago planned months ahead to harvest something that would melt if you looked at it funny. And they didn't do it for survival. They did it for comfort, for celebration, for taste. A chilled drink in July is a luxury even modern desert dwellers still prize. Now the ice is stacked inside the Yakhchāl. Carefully, air gaps are minimized. Straw insulates, the dome's thick sarouge walls repel heat. Windcatchers channel cool breezes downward, pushing warm air up and out like an exhaling sigh. As the entrance closes, the dome becomes a thermal time capsule. The ice will sit in silence for months, melting oh so slowly. Some of it will still be solid come midsummer. Enough to serve sorbet at a wedding or ice cakes at Nowruz, the Persian New Year. And you, sticky and sun-drenched, marvel at it all, the logistics, the ambition. The sheer determination to say, yes, this is a desert, but I'd still like my milkshake cold, thanks. A boy offers you a shard of cracked ice wrapped in date palm leaves. You crunch it between your teeth, shockingly cold, alarmingly satisfying. You can't help it, you laugh, a little childish, echoing giggle. Because this should be impossible, but here you are. You wander around the back of the Yakhchāl and notice small notches in the clay wall. Climbable, maybe, because of course, someone's teenage nephew dared them to scale it once. There's graffiti to ancient scrolls etched in Heists, a camel, a sun, a very unimpressed goat. Quirky fact, some archaeologists have discovered dice, gained tokens, even beads and charms near Yakhchāls, suggesting these weren't just storage units. People littered, played, hid stuff, possibly even kissed behind them. The ancient Persian equivalent of meet me behind the 7-Eleven at dusk. You rest your back against the shaded curve again, sipping melted ice water from a goatskin pouch like it's the finest spa treatment. And despite the dust on your sandals, the dry film on your skin, the faint headache forming from heat, you feel like royalty. Because the truth is, this exact moment is why the Yakhchāl exists, for relief. For the hush of cool air brushing your forehead when the world outside is melting. It's not survival, it's something even better, comfort by design. You glance toward the distant mountains. Storm clouds gather their snow will fall soon, and the whole cycle will begin again. You wake early, rubbing the sleep from your eyes as a rooster's confused crow echoes off adobe walls. The sky is still bruised purple, the desert quiet, and a chill clings to your clothes, a rare gift. You step outside just as a crew of workers files past, carrying worn baskets, flat wooden shovels, and bundled cloths. No one speaks, they move like ghosts in the dawn. You follow, drawn by the slow ritual unfolding ahead. The air smells of cracked clay and last night's frost. You arrive at a field lined with wide, shallow trenches dug low into the earth. These are the ice pans, deceptively simple, and yet vital to the entire operation. Their bottoms are hard-packed clay, smoothed until nearly slick. The idea is simple: pour water in when night falls, let it freeze, scrape it out by sunrise. You watch the workers test the surface with bare toes. One nods and steps forward, kneeling like a priest about to pray. He chips the top layer of ice with a hooked blade. It breaks free with a satisfying crack. This isn't glamorous, it's freezing, finger-numbing, monotonous work. But the men move quickly, almost rhythmically scooping, lifting, stacking the delicate frozen layers like glass. Each chunk is wrapped in straw and bundled for the journey to the Yakhchāl. Every ounce matters, because a few minutes of sun could turn hours of labor into a puddle. You help gather what you can, mostly getting in the way. Your breath clouds the air as you shuffle from one trench to the next. Some pans have only slushy rims, others glitter, perfectly frozen. The difference may be a breeze, maybe a cloud cover, maybe bad luck. Historians still argue whether Persians had precise methods to forecast freeze depth, or just used their fingers and hope. A boy beside you starts humming a folk tune as he slides a block of ice into a wheelbarrow. You join him, softly, and for a brief moment, the freezing dawn feels almost joyful. Later, you ride with the ice caravan through winding alleyways, watching doors open at your passing. People lean out, sleepy-eyed, to count the baskets, to ask about the ice quality, to haggle before the sun climbs to high. Because once it's up, the race begins. Time bends strangely here. Ice melts not in hours, but in heartbeats. One housewife claps gleefully when she sees her delivery. A boy darts out to grab a sliver before it disappears. An old man scowls at his melting purchase and mutters about last year's team being faster. You wonder if Yelp existed back then, in the form of poetry and passive-aggressive frowns. Now comes the storage. In smaller homes, people dig pits, mini Yakhchāls lined with straw, shaded by trees and sealed with heavy lids. They'll use the ice for special occasions, weddings, religious festivals, or treating illness, a sore throat. Add snow to the pomegranate syrup, a fever? Rub frozen rosewater over the temples. In wealthier homes, you step inside purpose-built ice rooms, mudbrick chambers with thick walls and small vents. These mini vaults often double as bragging rights. Come see our cool room, one woman beams, waving you in like it's the VIP lounge of ancient Persia. Inside, stacked ice, damp linen, and a faint floral scent. Somewhere nearby, a rooster pecks at a melting puddle, clearly unimpressed. The communal Yakhchāls still hold the bulk, of course, they're the big leagues. But all over the city, smaller caches echo the same ingenuity. Persia didn't just invent one refrigerator. It scaled the idea down to neighborhoods and up to palaces. Quirky detail for your trivia brain: some villages pass down ice plots like family heirlooms. A certain corner of a pit might be grandfather's chill, protected and fought over like dessert gold. Petty, maybe, but you've never had someone lick your popsicle without asking, so reserve judgment. There's a theory some scholars support, though it remains debated, that Persian engineers observed how shaded caves and deep wells kept water cooler. They copied nature, enhanced it, and adapted it into architecture. Others argue the knowledge came via India or even the Greeks. But the Persians made it theirs, refining it until even enemies sent scholars to peek inside the domes. You return to the city square, now warming with sunlight. The frost of morning is gone, replaced by sun-fresh bread, fried onions, and a surprise, a sweet floral aroma drifting from a shaded stall. You edge closer. On display, nestled in bronze bowls on a damp cloth, faluda, a noodle-like dessert of semi-frozen syrup and vermicelli. One bowl glistens with sour cherry syrup, another with lime and crushed mint. It's made with snow, yes, actual snow, stored just hours ago. You try a spoonful, cold, slightly chewy, faintly perfumed. And it hits you. This isn't about ice, it's about mood, emotion, memory, The feeling of standing in a sunburned alley with something cold in your mouth and forgetting for just one glorious second that you're in a furnace disguised as a city. Persians understood this deeply, that ice could heal, entertain, and soothe. That it made suffering slightly more elegant. That even the harshest desert needed an oasis not just of water, but of joy. You sit there a while, watching the dessert seller swap gossip with an old man, joking about whose granddaughter had the fancier wedding. A child squeals with delight as a dripping chunk of ice slides down his tunic. No one minds. You lean back, fanning yourself with a woven mat, and smile. The sun is rising, the heat returning. But somewhere beneath your feet, in a thick-walled dome filled with silent shadows, ice still waits. You wake again later this time. The sun is already halfway up the sky, pouring over flat rooftops and crumbling walls like molten gold. Your shirt clings to your back and the air feels like warm soup. It's the kind of heat that makes metal too hot to touch, bread bake on stone, and mood spoil before noon. So today, you're shadowing the builders, the real desert wizards. The ones who figured out how to trap winter and release it on command. You're standing at a construction site, though it doesn't look like much. Just a lot of clay, straw bundles, and a few men arguing over slope angles using sticks and their bare feet. But what they're building will outlast them. Will outlast you, may even outlast your microwave. This, friend, is how they built the Yakhchāls. Let's start with the base. Flat, no, never. It's dug below ground level. A sunken pit helps temperature control cooler underground, and easier to seal from the top. Around this pit, they begin to layer saruj, that weirdly magical mortar you first saw. A mix of clay, sand, lime, ash, egg whites, and goat hair because apparently ancient Persians looked at a breakfast omelet and thought, that's wall material. You squat beside one of the builders, watching him knead the mix with his bare hands, the texture like gritty hummus. It smells earthy, tangy, and faintly like someone broke a dozen eggs too close to the sun. They begin to pack the saruj into molds, laying it in horizontal rings that will eventually taper upward. It's slow going. Each layer must dry before the next goes on. There's no quick fix here. Patience isn't just a virtue, it's structural integrity. You offer to help. The older mason hands you a trowel, smirking, probably thinking you'll give up in 2 minutes. And honestly, you nearly do. The clay sticks, your wrists ache, everything turns brown. You don't know if you're building a wall or being absorbed into one. But then like Sardo or IKEA furniture, you begin to get it. The rhythm, the flow, you spread, pat, repeat. You step back and see a wall rising, ever so slightly curved, like a giant pot taking shape from the earth itself. Now, the shape, that's the secret. Not a cube, not a box, but a conical dome, wide at the base and narrowing upward. Why? Because physics, dear sleeper. Heat rises, a conical shape channels that upward flow. At the same time, the dome minimizes surface area exposed to the sun. The slanted sides reflect heat, and any warm air inside drifts naturally up and away from the stored ice. Think of it like an upside-down funnel that makes the hot stuff get lost on the way out. Historians still argue whether this exact design was influenced by earlier Mesopotamian ziggurats, or if it was purely a Persian innovation. Either way, once they figured it out, they built dozens, maybe hundreds. From Kashan to Kerman, cities that would have melted into footnotes in summer heat instead became cold treat capitals. You wander to a finished dome nearby, baked hard under the sun. You knock on it solid like a bunker made of cake. The walls over 2 meters thick in some places. That saruj isn't just strong, it's water resistant and heat repelling. A structure built of literal mud ... that shrugs at the desert. Quirky detail incoming. Some builders mix camel urine into the mortar for added durability. Supposedly made it tougher and more pest resistant. Now you understand why no one dares lick the walls, even on a dare. You explore the dome's inner walls. No windows, of course. Just occasional vents and one main entrance always facing north. Why? Because north-facing means less direct sunlight, and the prevailing winds from that direction often help cool the interior. You realize they weren't just guessing, they were studying, observing, designing with the wind. You peer upward, near the dome's peak. A small vent cap flickers with a breeze. It lets hot air escape while keeping sunlight out a reverse chimney. And if you climb onto the outer walkway, you can spot where future windcatchers might be added. Ah yes, windcatchers, but don't get ahead of yourself. That's for later. Right now, you're standing inside the shell of an ancient refrigerator, marveling at how little they had and how much they figured out. A passing child hands you a date and skips off. You munch quietly, the sweet chewiness somehow comforting inside the hushed dome. You sit down right where future ice will sleep and feel the dust under your legs. You wonder how many people spend their summers leaning against these walls, whispering secrets, hiding from chores, or savoring a stolen fig in the cool silence. Was this dome just an appliance, a utility, or a sanctuary? You hear voices outside, more bricks arriving, more sarouge to mix. The dome is nearly done. Soon, it will close its lips to the sky and become a sealed chamber of seasonal defiance. And you stand quietly, hand on the wall, almost reluctant to leave. Because somehow, this dome feels alive, not with breath, but with purpose. It doesn't fight the desert. It outsmarts it. You emerge from the half-built Yakhchāl into the late afternoon haze, blinking against the sun's glare like you've been reborn. Your hands are still caked with dried sarouge, and your lower back is staging a minor rebellion, but there's a quiet pride pulsing through your bones. You helped build a thing that doesn't just sit in the sand, it thinks in temperature. But today's lesson in Persian ingenuity isn't over. Because now you're climbing a tower. It rises just behind the dome, a narrow, rectangular shaft with small slits along its height. No spiral staircases, no fancy carvings, just functional bricks and a purpose as cool as the breeze it's about to summon. This, dear traveler, is a windcatcher, or in local terms, a badger. You grab a foothold, then another, and slowly, ungracefully, make your way to the top. The view is what you'd expect: beige rooftops, clustered domes, goat carts, and at least one cat pretending to be asleep on a window ledge. But it's not the view that matters up here. It's the air. Suddenly, a gust brushes your face. Not much a whisper, really, but enough to raise goosebumps. In the middle of this broiling desert afternoon, you're catching a current of air pulled through architecture itself. The windcatcher's structure is deceptively simple: tall, narrow vents on all four sides, each angled and divided with internal partitions. The height catches wind from any direction, and the internal design channels it downward, directing the airflow through connected tunnels into the structure below, usually a home, a cistern, or, in this case, the Yakhchāl. You climb back down sweaty, dusty, and vaguely victorious. Then you duck into a shaded corner of the Yakhchāl where the breeze from the badger now quietly flows. It's subtle, but real. Not like a blast from a modern AC, but a slow, steady exhale that pushes warm air out the top vent and draws coolness downward, like a desert sighing in reverse. Some versions of these windcatchers even had wet mats or pottery basins at their base. When wind passed over water or damp cloth, it cooled even further, a primitive form of evaporative cooling, still used in parts of the world today. Historians still debate whether the technique originated in Persia or whether Egyptians and Mesopotamians were early adopters too. But most agree the Persians perfected it. They weren't just catching the wine, they were engineering it. The joke, of course, is that today we have electric fans, central cooling, and digital thermostats. And we still somehow manage to sweat through our sheets every summer. Meanwhile, someone 2,500 years ago stood barefoot in a mud brick tower and thought, let's let the air do the work. You follow a small boy who's been tasked with adjusting the inner slats of the badger. He pulls a rope tied to a flap, redirecting airflow from east to west. His reward, a dried fig and a pat on the head. You consider applying for the position. As the day drifts toward evening, the air inside the Yakhchāl becomes noticeably cooler, proof that the system works. No wires, no motors, just wind, geometry, and a few damp textiles. You think about how many modern buildings ignore this kind of logic. How many skyscrapers in boiling cities fight the sun rather than outmaneuvering it? Outside, a family rolls out blankets near the Yakhchāl. Dinner is simple: lentils, flatbread, something pickled, and something sweet. And with it a cold drink, not freezing, but refreshingly cool. Pulled from a storage jug buried near the Yakhchāl's base, it's infused with mint and cucumber. You sip, and immediately forgive the universe for everything it's ever done to you. As stars begin to poke through the darkening sky, someone lights a small oil lamp. It casts flickering shadows on the curved surface of the dome. The windcatcher sighs softly in the background. Crickets begin their evening chorus. And then you hear it. A faint gurgling, somewhere below, a tunnel system that connects the Windcatcher to the underground chambers. Air circulating, the dome breathing. It's not loud, you might even miss it if you weren't listening so hard. But there it is, the steady, quiet rhythm of air and stone working together. A silent agreement between architecture and nature. Quirky side note, some ancient badgers weren't just for cooling, they also served as whisper tunnels. The way sound traveled through certain shafts made it possible for someone at the base to hear conversations from far above. Were they used for spying? For fun? For secret lovers? No one knows for sure. But it makes you wonder how many ancient gossip sessions echo down these walls. You lie down on the warm stone beside the dome, folding your arms under your head. The stars swirl lazily above, and the tower keeps exhaling. You don't say it out loud, but the thought curls up somewhere behind your eyelids. Why did we ever stop building like this? The night settles into something soft and sleepy, but you're not done yet. The dome behind you sighs gently through its windcatcher, and the sand has finally cooled to something tolerable under your bare feet. A goat bleats once, then immediately regrets the energy expenditure. You're starting to understand the desert's rhythm. Do nothing fast, and coolness comes to those who wait. Tonight, you're going below. A man with a crooked lantern beckons silently. He's short, a bit round, with sandals so worn they're basically memories. He gestures to a narrow, sloping tunnel dug into the side of the Yakhchāl's base, the access tunnel. You duck low and follow, knees brushing dusty walls, breath catching in the close air. Then, suddenly, the world opens up. You're standing in a wide, vaulted chamber, lit by the flickering oil lamp in the old man's hand. The air is cold, not snowball fight cold, but grab a shawl and hug your elbows cold. A gentle shiver moves up your spine. You've entered the belly of the Yakhchāl. This is where the real work happens. Where ice is stored, sorted, rationed, but not just ice. There are earthenware jars, neatly lined up along the wall, some sealed, some already opened. You lift the lid of one and inhale rose water. Another holds thick syrup made from grapes and honey. A third, saffron-soaked almonds. They weren't just preserving ice, they were preserving pleasure. In the far corner lies a shallow depression in the floor. It's filled with cloudy, half-melted ice, still resting on a bed of straw. The runoff is funneled away via a hidden channel that drains deeper underground, likely into a conduit, one of Persia's ingenious underground aqueducts. Nothing is wasted. You trail your fingers along the jars. The temperature here stays consistent year-round, thanks to passive thermal insulation and those double-thick sarouge walls. The airflow is slow but deliberate. A modern HVAC engineer would weep with admiration. There's something intimate about this space. Like stepping into someone's pantry, but ancient and sacred. The jars are labeled with wax seals or etched clay tokens. Some bear dates by lunar calendar, others have names. Ownership matters. Theft of ice in high summer, that's not petty crime. That's basically culinary treason. The old man chuckles and shows you a long, winding tunnel at the back of the chamber. You follow, the air growing damper as you move. Eventually, it opens into another low-ceilinged space. More jars, yes, but here's the twist. The floor is damp and the walls are slick with condensation. This room stored not just food but fermented delicacies. Chilled dates steeped in spiced vinegar, pickled limeys. Yogurt that's been aged in clay until it tastes like history itself. Historians still argue whether these deeper chambers were always part of the design, or if later generations burrowed further as needs expanded. Some believe these subterranean rooms were added during the Safavid period, when dessert culture exploded. Others argue that the Achaemenid engineers were way ahead of their time and just liked secrets. Either way, this underworld is astonishing. You hear a faint splash. Around the corner, a narrow cistern holds the remains of a winter melt. It's murky now but still cold. The guide offers you a ladle, carved from bone. You sip. It tastes like cold silence, earthy, pure. Your lips tingle a little. And then suddenly music. A low hum, a drumbeat above. You glance toward the ceiling and realize there's a small vent carved through the wall. Just wide enough for sound to slip in. Someone's having a celebration outside, probably a wedding. Or maybe they're just thrilled about a particularly satisfying sorbet. The old man smiles, slaps the jar nearest to him, and says something about saffron and snow. You don't catch the words. But the tone is clear. This is joy, quiet joy. The kind stored underground. waiting to be unearthed spoon by spoon. You sit with him a while, the two of you not speaking, just sipping chilled water and enjoying the dark. There's a peace here that doesn't exist above ground. No heat, no rush. Just cool, damp stone and the faintest whiff of cardamom from a broken jar nearby. Fun fact, some of these underground chambers became hiding spots during invasions. When cities were under siege, nobles or merchants would slip into these cool vaults and wait out the chaos, surrounded by preserves and frozen hope. You stretch your legs, your body protests, but your brain is wide awake. You feel like you've entered a forgotten temple, one that worships cold instead of fire. And in the desert, that's a radical thing. Before leaving, you take one last glance back at the icy basin, the jars, the walls dripping with persistence. You place a hand on the clay. It's cool to the touch. Up above, people are dancing. Below, ice quietly refuses to melt. You climb back up slowly, re-entering the night air. The stars haven't moved, but you feel slightly changed. Not every hero fights dragons. Some just store snow in a desert. You're back above ground now, blinking at a silvered sky and the flicker of oil lamps hanging from doorways. The air is still warm, but compared to the oven you walked through earlier, it's practically sweater weather. Somewhere behind you, the Yakhchāl breathes its steady, cool rhythm like a stone giant in meditation. But tonight, you're not here to study storage. You're here to make dessert. A woman in a deep green robe waves you over to a small courtyard tucked behind a series of narrow alleys. Her hands are stained gold with saffron, and there's already a table full of tools, mortar and pestle, bronze pans, dried fruits, metal bowls, and a thin sheen of frost forming on earthenware pots nestled in cloth-wrapped ice. You're about to witness the impossible, ancient Persian ice cream, made without machines, freezers, or a single electrical wire. You sit cross-legged beside the table, trying not to get in the way. A bowl of crushed pistachios is handed to you. You're told to stir gently. As you do, the scent of cardamom wafts up. It's heady, calming, like the scent of summer in a very fancy spa. Next to you, another helper grinds saffron threads in warm water. The color turns a deep, royal amber. She adds it to a chilled milk mixture, already sweetened with grape syrup and rosewater. The scent is magical, sweet, floral, creamy, just the faintest edge of something exotic and earthy. You swear you can taste it in the air. And this shimmering mixture is the base for Bostani Sanati, one of the earliest ancestors of Persian ice cream. Here's how they do it. Step 1. Pour the golden, fragrant mixture into shallow bronze trays and set them inside wide bowls packed with crushed ice and rock salt. Step 2. Stir slowly, continuously until it begins to thicken. Step 3. Add crushed pistachios, add sliced dates. Maybe a ribbon of pomegranate syrup if someone's really showing off. Step 4. Repeat and wait. You take a turn, stirring, your fingers go numb gripping the tray, but you persist. Eventually, the mixture begins to firm at the edges. Someone scrapes it toward the center with a carved spatula. The texture? Closer to semi-freddo than soft serve, grainy, chewy, wonderfully uneven. You're not making perfection, you're making history. Quirky detail, the Persians weren't content with just cold desserts, they loved texture. Bostani often included faluda, those curious frozen vermicelli noodles made from starch and chilled syrup. You watch a child twirl some onto a plate and top it with lime juice and sour cherry syrup. Then they take one bite and dance away, sticky and grinning. You try it next, cold, chewy, slightly tangy, refreshing in the weirdest, most wonderful way. It's not like anything you've had in the modern world. It's lighter, stranger, somehow truer. A copper bowl of saffron ice cream is passed around. The consistency is firmer now, closer to what you'd recognize as frozen. You spoon it up, and it melts slowly on your tongue. Sweet, but not sugary, fragrant, ancient, like a poem you can eat. And yes, you ask for seconds. Historians still argue how much of this was actually ice cream by today's definitions. There were no eggs, no churners, no uniform freezing. But what's undeniable is that the technique was deliberate, repeated, and beloved. The ice wasn't a novelty, it was a vessel for taste, celebration, and maybe a little showing off. There's even debate over who had it first. The Chinese had frozen milk blends, the Indians were brewing coffee. The Romans stored snow in cellars and poured honey over it. But Persia? Persia built architecture to make sure their desserts stayed cold all year long. That's not a craving, that's a commitment. Now someone brings out a flat disc of what looks like bread. You bite it and it crumbles instantly light, airy, barely sweet. It's called nane no kochi, chickpea flour shortbread. Traditionally served with cold desserts, so you don't get brain freeze. Ancient Persia, the land of both invention and common sense. As the meal winds down, people begin to sing softly. Not loud, boisterous party songs, but lullaby-like tunes that feel embroidered with sleep. A woman brings a final offering, thin glass cups of cold saffron tea, a sunset in liquid form, brewed earlier and stored in clay to chill. You sip and sigh, and if your toes weren't already numb, they would curl in delight. You look around. 100 flickering oil flames cast golden shadows on the whitewashed walls. The air smells like sugar, milk, rose petals, and the cooling earth. Someone's playing a cedar nearby, its strings bending notes gently in the warm dark. And somewhere in the distance, back in the Yakhchāl, the last of the evening's ice slowly lets go of another droplet. It trickles down ancient stone and joins the slow, underground stream feeding the cycle. You close your eyes. Not because you're tired, but because this moment was designed to be savored in the dark. By the time you wake, the sun is high and utterly unapologetic. It doesn't sneak up on you, it slams down, full force. Like a celestial hairdryer set to inferno, you're back in the heat now. Your fingers sticky from last night's desserts, your sandals somehow hotter than the sun itself, and your tongue craving a repeat performance of that saffron-laced ice cream. But instead of ice today, you're heading to water. Specifically, you're going to follow it underground. You're led by a stooped old man with a walking stick carved into the shape of a peacock. His robe is dusty white, his voice barely louder than the wind. He doesn't explain much, just waves you forward toward a strange little door set low in the ground, covered with woven mats and shaded by a crumbling fig tree. This is the entrance to a connaught. You duck inside and immediately feel the temperature drop. Your skin breathes, your shoulders loosen, no more squinting, no more sunburn. Just the hush of stone and the sound faint but growing of flowing water. The tunnel narrows, then widens. The ceiling is just tall enough to let you stand upright if you slouch like you're trying to disappear. You brush cobwebs aside, bats flutter overhead. Somewhere deeper in, a cool mist kisses your face. And then you hear it clearly, water. Not a trickle, not a drip, but a genuine, living stream, flowing silently beneath the desert like a secret. You step closer and see it clear, glistening, cold. Water that has traveled miles from distant mountain snowfields through a series of gently sloping channels carved into the rock by hand over generations. This is the lifeblood of Persian civilization, and it's brilliant. See, Canaanites work without pumps, no buckets, no wheels. Just gravity and an incredibly patient sense of geometry. They begin where the water table is high in the foothills and carry the flow, gently sloped, toward lower elevation towns and villages. Along the way, vertical shafts are dug every 20 to 30 meters. These are used for construction, maintenance, and sometimes just for ventilation. And surprise twist, they connect directly to Yakhchāls. Because when you're trying to preserve ice in the desert, you want cold water nearby. To replenish losses, to add dampness, to cool the air flowing through. Canaanites weren't just about irrigation, they were part of a broader thermal ecosystem. Historians still argue whether the earliest Canaanites appeared in Persia or whether similar systems were developed in Egypt and even pre-Islamic Arabia. But there's no denying that Persia made them a national infrastructure. Thousands of miles of tunnels, some still in use today. You trail your fingers in the water, it feels like silk, cold silk. Along the Canaanites' wall, someone has scratched a series of notches, probably water level markers from different seasons. Another spot shows graffiti, a date, a name, and what might be a fish wearing a hat. Because apparently, even 2,000 years ago, people were bored during maintenance shifts. Your guide leads you to a small alcove carved into the side. Inside is a water storage chamber, not for ice this time, but for temperature control. Cool clay pots are arranged in rows, submerged halfway in the groundwater. They're filled with sharbat, flavored syrup drinks diluted with cold water just before serving. You take a cup, it's tart, tangy, maybe quince, or sour plum, and so cold, it sends a shiver up your spine. Another quirky discovery, some aristocrats built small seating chambers near connaught outlet, stone benches, shady awnings, sometimes even decorative tiles. They'd sit there for hours sipping drinks, enjoying the natural breeze created by the flowing water below. You're basically sitting in one now, minus the servants and string quartet. You ask your guide how long this particular sonnet has been in use. He just shrugs and says, "Before my grandfather's grandfather's grandfather had knees." You nod solemnly, as if that's a certified unit of measurement. Then he tells you something else. There's a story passed down part myth, part maybe not myth, that in particularly hot years, when the Yakhchāl's ice stores were low, villagers would sneak into canaans at night, carrying bowls of cream and sugar and fruit. They'd nestle them inside alcoves to freeze slowly by the chilled air and wet stone, makeshift ice cream caves. Never tell the mayor, your guide whispers, it was technically illegal. You laugh, sip the last of your sharbat, and lean back against the stone. The air here is cooler than any house you visited. It doesn't hum, it doesn't buzz, it just is. A calm, ancient kind of cool. And it's all thanks to math and manual labor and a lot of very determined digging. Eventually, you head back up, blinking again as the sun smacks your face. You turn and look at the wellhead, just a hole in the ground to most, but now you know it's so much more. It's the desert's invisible secret. A thing that doesn't announce itself, but supports everything: ice, life, luxury, and quiet midnight desserts. You nod to your guide, who is now feeding a goat some dried figs, and make your way back toward the city. Back to the domes, back to the windcatchers, back to the ice. Because water moves quietly underground. But its magic? That's everywhere. The city is humming again, but not with voices or footsteps. It hums with heat. The kind that seems to come from beneath you, as if the earth itself is tired of holding it in. You shuffle through dusty alleyways, dodging cats, trailing the scent of warm bread and scorched cumin, until you reach a wide courtyard surrounded by low walls and sleepy orange trees. At its center sits something you haven't seen before: an open-air pavilion with a dome ceiling and no doors. It's ringed with benches and built around a shallow stone pool filled with water so still it mirrors the sky like glass. And perched in the center, quietly sweating in the heat, is a jug. Not just any jug, a Zira clay vessel engineered to chill water without ice, without shade, and certainly without sorcery. You walk closer, the ground around the basin cool beneath your solace, and place your hand on the jug's surface. It's cold, like startlingly cold. And once again, you ask yourself, how? The secret is in the clay and the science. And the brilliant simplicity of porous evaporation. See, these vessels, zirs, or sometimes called zir pots, are made of unglazed clay, allowing water to slowly seep through the surface and evaporate. When it does, it draws heat away from the remaining liquid inside, cooling it naturally. Pair this with a shaded breeze, and you've got something remarkably close to a fridge. Sometimes they even nest the pots together with a layer of wet sand between. It's like ancient Tupperware, but it can lower water temperature by 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. Enough to make a difference, enough to preserve milk, butter, even cheese. And they'd often position these ingenious vessels near Yakhchāls or beneath windcatchers, supercharging the cooling effect. The Persians weren't just inventing tools, they were stacking them, layering cooling systems like engineers with very little budget, but way too much brilliance. You take a sip from the jug. It's not icy, but it's refreshing, the kind of cold that feels earned, like it shouldn't be possible, and yet here it is, smirking in defiance of the sun. You sit near the pool, watching shadows play along the courtyard walls. A woman sweeps lazily with a palm broom. Somewhere nearby, a child shrieks with delight, followed by the unmistakable splash of someone jumping headfirst into a communal fountain. You hear scolding, then giggling, then splashing again. Quirky detail: in some towns, large clay jars were buried halfway into the earth under street corners or inside homes, constantly refilled with water from the canaans. Passers-by could dip a cup or a ladle and take a drink. Entire cities with public hydration infrastructure millennia before the first plastic bottle was even imagined. But today's destination isn't just water. You're here for another miracle of ancient cold: cooling bread. Yes, bread. You're led to a humble kitchen, bare walls, a tandoor oven glowing in the corner, and 3 women in patterned scarves working fast, barehanded, like their palms have permanent calluses from generations of dough duty. One slaps flat bread onto the hot wall of the oven. Another flips golden discs onto a cooling rack. But the third? She takes the hot bread and places it not on a tray, but in a shallow clay cooling dome, buried halfway in the floor, and lightly misted inside a mini bread fridge. You lean over, the heat of the bread is drawn into the moist interior walls. In 10 minutes, the crust firms, the steam evaporates, and the bread is cool, not fridge cold, but touchable, eatable, shelf-stable. Historians still debate whether this cooling method was common in village homes or just a baker's trick to speed up workflow. Some even believe Yakhchāls were occasionally used for short-term bread storage during festivals, where mass baking was required and spoilage was a real threat. You imagine a dome-packed floor-to-ceiling with cold naan and suddenly understand why some ancient poets wept over bread loss. You're handed a piece crisp edges, soft middle, cool just enough not to burn your fingertips. It's slathered in labneh, a thick, tangy yogurt that was stored in a nearby clay pot suspended in water. The contrast of cold cheese on warmish bread is divine. You eat slowly, crumbs clinging to your shirt, as the breeze picks up and ruffles the corner of a linen curtain. A boy walks past with a clay-wrapped melon tucked under one arm. He grins, then slips it into a small, vented pantry built into the courtyard wall. Inside, another breeze-driven, evaporative set-up-pan open-shelf desert fridge. The idea was simple: circulate air, keep the sun off, let the melon rest on a moist surface, and rotate it regularly. It's not just cooling, it's ritual. You could write a whole cookbook called Chilling in the Desert, 1,000 Ways to Not Sweat. You lie back, full of bread and labneh, staring up at the sky, which is now beginning to blush with late afternoon light. The jug near the pool is still sweating, the breeze is a little stronger. The very air seems to be remembering how to be gentle again. And through it all, beneath the courtyards, between the clay pots, under the domes and down the canettes, the great silent system of ancient comfort keeps doing its job. No wires, no plugs, just intelligence, passed down like heirloom spice. The sun is finally slipping behind the rooftops, but the heat still clings like a film. You've made peace with the sweat by now, it's part of the costume, like sandals and sarcasm. But tonight, you're being taken somewhere different. Not to a Yakhchāl, not to a connaught, but to a rooftop. Because cooling, it turns out, wasn't just about ice and water. It was about designing how people live. You climb a narrow staircase that twists up between sun-baked walls. Clay bricks, worn smooth by centuries of hands, guide your way. At the top, a flat, open terrace unfurls under a dusky purple sky. The view? A patchwork of other rooftops, domes, badgers, and satellite dishes pretending they belong. Your host, a wiry man with clever eyes, welcomes you with a nod and a jug of cool rose water. You sit cross-legged on woven rugs, the kind that collect the stories of naps and night wines. The air is calm, but not still, it moves. Not randomly, but with purpose. Because this roof isn't flat by accident. It's slightly sloped, subtly channeled, with open borders that allow air to flow freely. There are low parapets to break the wind gently, shaded alcoves built into corners, and most importantly, a sunken sleeping platform, cooled by design and protected from harsh breezes. It's the desert's answer to air conditioning, sleeping with the sky. The trick, the thermal mass of the thick walls and the stone floor absorbs heat during the day, then slowly releases it after sundown, cooling the air around you. Add an evaporative cooling, a bowl of water near your sleeping mat, or maybe just a wet cloth, and the night becomes livable, comfortable, even. Quirky tidbit: some families kept small goatskins of chilled water hanging near their beds, with a pinhole that dripped onto a stone. As it evaporated, it cooled the nearby air. Combine that with windcatcher vents aimed just right, and suddenly your ancient rooftop is basically a spa. You lie back and stare at the stars. They're not like the ones at home. These don't blink through light pollution. They stare right back. The Milky Way pours across the sky like spilled sugar. A child points out a constellation that roughly translates to the sheep who refuse to be shorn. You try to find it, fail, and pretend you did anyway. You're served a bowl of doog, a chilled yogurt drink, salted and spiced with dried mint, tangy, cold, perfect. It's been kept in a clay vessel lowered into a nearby wall niche, designed to stay cool even in summer. You ask how it works. Your host shrugs because it's clever, he says. Like everything else. And he's not wrong. The deeper you look, the more you realize ancient Persian homes weren't built to fight the heat. They were built to partner with it. Courtyards that drew cool air inward. Thick walls that breathed shaded passageways. Pools of water placed not for luxury, but for physics. Historians still argue whether these architectural choices were consciously scientific or simply the product of generations learning what worked. Either way, the effect was the same: comfort without consumption. You wander a bit, careful not to trip over a sleeping cat that might actually be a folded carpet. In one corner of the rooftop, a young woman is carefully pouring syrup into ice mold small metal containers nestled in a box lined with insulation and leftover ice from the Yakhchāl. She's making coffee or something close to it, sweetened with dates and perfumed with orange blossom. You ask to help, she hands you a stick. You press it into the mold, gently, making sure it stands straight. She nods approval. There's something about rooftops. They're both public and private, sacred and casual. Here, people cool off. Here, people dream. Many marriages began under these skies, so did poems, so did snacks. Another quirky fact: some wealthier homes had mechanical roof screens made from wood or cloth, adjusted depending on the sun's angle, allowing airflow while blocking direct heat. Your host shows you a version of lattice frame, easy to swing shut with a rope. You could almost call it the ancient world's answer to blinds and AC vents. You lie back again. The coffee isn't ready yet, but it will be, slowly, like everything else here. And suddenly, you remember something the Yakhchāl days ago now. How impossibly large it seemed, and yet, that dome is just one part of the system. This rooftop is another, the connet below your feet. The breeze above your face, the bowl of water that cools by its own evaporation. Nothing here works alone. That's the real lesson. Even cooling, even cold desserts, even sleep itself, it all depends on collaboration. Earth and air, water and stone, heat and patience. The stars keep watching, the coffee sets. A breeze lifts the edge of your robe, and you let it. You let everything go: the day, the sun, the sweat, the need to understand every mechanism. Because right now, in this moment, you're part of the system too. Morning arrives gently this time, with the kind of soft, golden light that makes even cracked plaster look poetic. You wake on the rooftop, blanket tangled around your ankles, mouth slightly dry but spirit oddly light. The city hasn't quite stretched yet, it's still dreaming. You're going to the bazaar. Not the loud, frantic, elbow you for spices kind of bazaar. This one's tucked near the old city walls, half in shadow, half memory. The stalls are just opening, creaking like old knees. Bread ovens breathe steam, copper pots clink. And more importantly, ice chests are being unpacked. Because ice wasn't just for aristocrats or experimental rooftop popsicles. It was commerce, traded, weighed, preserved. A luxury, yes, but also a business. You follow a cart being wheeled in its wheels squeak, and one clearly has a vendetta against smooth motion. On top, buried in straw and wrapped in linen, is a block of ice about the size of your head. Two boys are fanning it with palm leaves, a third carries a bell. This is not subtle, this is a performance. They stop near a fruit seller's stall. The ice is lifted, shown off like treasure, and quickly transferred to a basin beneath the table. Inside it, melons, plums, cucumbers so green they might have been painted in a dream. Cold fruit sells faster, especially to sleep-deprived nobles with picky palates. Next stall, a man selling iced drinks, or at least, things vaguely in that category. Clay tumblers filled with liquids of questionable color and certain refreshment, tamarind, sour cherry, cucumber basil, and what might be milk and thyme, but you're not confident. Each cup has a shard of chipped ice floating at the top. Not cubes, no one had silicone molds, but jagged slivers hacked off a larger block with a curved knife. You try the sour cherry. It's tangy and sharp, chilled just enough to earn a blink and a satisfied grunt. Quirky footnote: some vendors used fish bladders or beaten egg whites to clarify these drinks. Not for flavor, but to catch impurities and leave the liquid beautifully transparent. Ancient beverage science at its finest. Whether it worked or was just a placebo is still up for debate, but hey, it looked fancy. You wander deeper. One vendor sells sweets with frozen fillings, date pastries hiding chilled honey. Another offers rice pudding served cold, topped with crushed rose petals and candied lemon. A grandmother spoons it into a clay bowl with all the ceremony of a priest offering a sacrament. Historians still argue whether these cold treats were reserved for the elite or filtered down to common folk during festival seasons. Some say it depended entirely on how close your house was to a Yakhchāl or Khanate entrance. Others argue it was simply about who you knew in the ice-moving business. Because, yes, there were ice movers, men always men, it seems, who specialized in transporting blocks from Yakhchāls to homes, businesses, temples. They wrapped ice in layers of straw, cloth, and goat hair, stacked them on camels or donkeys, and moved out before dawn. Their routes were carefully planned, their pace deliberate, and their reputations, well, frosty. You spot one now grizzled beard, pack animal in tow, wrapped bundle strapped to its back. He stops to talk to a tea house owner, probably negotiating a price per shard. You edge closer, trying to listen, but they speak in low tones. This is trade, and trade, even of ice, carries secrets. You stop by the tea house later, when the deal is done. The owner is slicing thin wafers of ice into small saucers, prepping for his noon rush. His trick? He floats rosewater on top of the tea, so it cools first, letting the scent hit before the heat. A sensory decoy, you try a cup, and for a moment, you forget it's the middle of a desert summer. Then a boy runs past yelling, "Sharbat, cold sharbat, 5 drops for a dirham." He's dragging a little wooden cart with wheels that clearly don't align. Inside it, a tiny clay vat kept cool with layered linen and, wait for it, a bit of snow, stolen from a rich man's rooftop stash. The boy grins at you like he knows he's going to get caught eventually, but not today. You buy a sip anyway, not because it's the best, but because it's cold and cheeky. It strikes you, as you sit back near a spice stall, that ancient cooling wasn't just about science or architecture, it was about community. The woman who made the syrup, the boys who moved the ice, the stonemason who angled a windcatcher just so, the street vendor who calculated the precise moment to serve frozen pomegranate seeds in a bowl of snow. None of it happened alone. And all of it happened here, in a bazaar where ice isn't just sold, it's celebrated. You chew a candied fig, the sugar sticks to your teeth. A sliver of ice clinks in your cup. The sun, as always, is watching. But for now, in this corner of the market, it's been politely asked to wait its turn. The midday sun has returned to full drama. It's not shining, it's declaring war. You retreat from the bazaar, sticky with syrup and dignity slightly melted, guided now by the promise of shade and something peculiar, a house made entirely for coolness. Not a palace, not a temple, just an ordinary home, from centuries ago, designed with an ordinary genius. Your host greets you at the threshold with a soft smile and a pitcher of water, so cold the clay jug sweats in his hands. He leads you in through a narrow, shaded entry called a darbast, built to block direct sun and keep hot air out. It's like entering a tunnel carved from stillness. And just like that, the heat disappears. The temperature drops several degrees the moment you pass through the door. No machines, no magic, just architecture. You're standing in the Anderuni, the private, inward part of the house reserved for family, where life happens in cool silence. The floor is stone, the walls are thick. The ceilings arch high, and above it all, peeking down like a benevolent periscope, is a windcatcher badger. These towers are everywhere in Persia's desert cities, but here, in the house, you finally understand their genius. The badger captures even the faintest breeze and channels it downward, using internal fins to split and redirect the air, guiding it gently through rooms and over small basins of water that cool it even more. If there's no breeze, the rising hot air inside the house creates suction, pulling cooler air up from the basement or courtyard. Either way, you win. You follow your host into the start of the basement. It's dim, quiet, and noticeably cooler than above. A small pool of water reflects the domed ceiling. Clay jars line the walls, each labeled with soft script. One holds yogurt, another barley water, another preserved herbs suspended in oil. You sit on a stone bench as he brings over a shallow bowl of cool barley soup, garnished with mint and dried rose petals. It tastes like someone turned summer into a gentle whisper. Then he tells you something you didn't expect. This entire house was built on mathematical ratios, not just aesthetic harmony, but thermal balance. The angle of the sun in summer, the thickness of walls, the positioning of courtyards. It's not random, it's designed coolness. Historians still argue how much of this was trial and error versus scientific intent. Some believe ancient architects followed empirical rules passed down like family recipes. Others claim sophisticated calculations involving thermal mass and airflow. What's clear is that the results speak for themselves. The courtyard is shaded by a grapevine canopy, thick with curling leaves and heavy clusters of fruit. Beneath it, a fountain murmurs. It's small, shallow, not ornamental but functional. As water evaporates, it cools the surrounding air, making this inner sanctuary the most comfortable spot in the house. Fun detail, sometimes, wet cloths were hung from the eaves, catching wind and creating miniature air conditioners. Your host has one fluttering in the doorway now. It drips gently into a narrow gutter that feeds the garden, nothing wasted, everything cycled. A young girl brings out a tray of cold melon slices, each resting on a leaf. You bite into one crisp, almost icy at the center. She giggles at your startled face and disappears, barefoot and triumphant. In one corner of the courtyard, you notice a strange little door, no taller than your hip. Your host opens it and shows you a storage nook, clay shelves nestled into the thick outer wall, kept cool by the house's own thermal inertia. Inside, cheeses wrapped in fig leaves, olives, dried fish stored in salt, all without refrigeration. No plugs, no buttons, just knowledge and design. And here's the kicker, this house isn't special, it's not a museum or reconstruction. It's real, lived in, ordinary by local standards. But to your modern sensibilities, it feels like a miracle with a kitchen. You move back upstairs and notice how the light plays along the walls, never directly, always filtered. Even the windows have mashrabia-style screens, letting in air and shadow while keeping out glare. Your host smiles and gestures to a small, quiet room near the back, likely a sleeping space. A mat, a shelf, a jug of water, that's it. You step in and sit, and for the first time in days, you understand what desert comfort really means. It isn't fighting the heat, it's partnering with it. It's thick walls that hold the nights cool, it's air that moves with purpose. It's floors that draw warmth away from your skin, and rooftops that invite the stars to tuck you in. You close your eyes for just a second and imagine what life must have been like in this house. Children sleeping on mats, a grandmother stirring yogurt before dawn, someone setting out a clay pot to cool the tea for guests who haven't even arrived yet. All of it built around the simple, noble goal of staying cool. And if that's not poetry, you're not sure what is. By now, you've seen the domes and the canets, the rooftops and the rosewater drinks. You sipped sherbet, shivered over ancient ice cream, and practically made eye contact with a windcatcher. You've eaten melon chilled in nothing more than thoughtful clay. But to date night, rather you're not learning something new. You're joining in. You've been invited to a Memunia traditional Persian evening gathering. Not a massive banquet, not a touristy spectacle. Just a few families, neighbors, cousins who might as well be siblings, and you the wide-eyed guest who still hasn't stopped asking how is this cold every 10 minutes. The courtyard is already lit with hanging lanterns, not electric oil, flickering softly. The air is heavy with the scent of charcoal and slow-cooked lamb. Musicians tune ancient instruments in the corner, their fingers moving lazily, like they're still deciding if they're awake yet. And in the center of it all, a frosted clay basin, nestled in a bed of crushed straw and fabric scraps. You know that look now, that's ice storage. You help uncover its sheets of linen peeled back to reveal jagged slivers of ice, harvested at dawn from the still chilly Yakhchāl. They're wrapped like treasure. They're disappearing slowly, melting into the cloth, sweating history. The host's daughter dips a brass ladle into the basin and pours melted ice into a jug of lime syrup. It hisses as the syrup hits the ice. She hands you the first glass, cold, tart, slightly bitter in the best way. It's liquid shade. And then you help serve it. It feels odd at first, playing drink master in a party of strangers. But here, you're not just a guest, you're part of the cooling chain. And that, in this world, is an honor. Nearby, someone sets out small bowls of Bostani Akbar Mashtia denser, chewier, modern take on the saffron ice cream you've come to crave. It's not ancient, but it's an evolution, same roots. Same desire to beat the heat with something creamy, fragrant, cold. You try a spoonful, you close your eyes. It's got everything saffron, rose, pistachio, and that texture, elastic, chewy, almost like someone tried to make ice cream more like bread dough and succeeded. You ask how it's made, the answer, slowly, carefully, with the help of a Yakhchāl, a bucket of salted ice, and a strong arm willing to churn for hours. You glance across the courtyard and see a boy, maybe 10, dragging a wooden paddle through a basin of syrup, ice sloshing at the edges. He's pretending to be tired, but you catch him smiling. This is the best job tonight. Quirky moment. Someone arrives late with a covered dish. They unveil it dramatically to reveal frozen grapes, tiny and glistening like jewels. Everyone cheers. Apparently, this person has a reputation. He always brings the fruit ice. Someone whispers, "Reverend." Historians still argue how widespread such casual cooling traditions were among common folk versus nobility. Some claim these gatherings were the domain of the wealthy. Others point to poetry and folklore that describe village-wide chill fests, with kids diving for snow in storage pits. Who's right? Probably both and neither. Because joy, like ice, is hard to pin down. As the night deepens, conversation slows, people stop talking over each other. The music fades to background hum, children fall asleep on cushions, and more than one adult pretends not to be dozing. You sip the last of your sharbat and notice the clay pots sweating gently under the lantern light. The air has cooled not dramatically, but enough. The heat has finally loosened its grip. Your host sits beside you, stretching his legs with a groan. "You like?" he asks, gesturing to the bowl of melting ice cream. You nod, mouth full, probably glowing. He smiles. You think this is clever, but it's not clever, it's necessary. You live here long enough. You don't fight the sun, you learn to use it against itself. You blink at him, a little startled by the poetry of that statement. But he's already pouring himself a drink and motioning for you to take another serving. Later, they bring out blankets, the kind that smell like summer dust and dried herbs. People lie back on the rugs, some start humming again, low and unhurried. The wind moves lazily through the courtyard, bouncing between walls and into the badger above, which moans softly like it's dreaming. And there it is again. That feeling. The sense that you're not a visitor anymore, you're part of this. You're contributing to the cycle, cool hands passing cool cups, quiet voices echoing off cool stone. You look up, the sky is gone black and bottomless. The stars are out in full brag, the heat is finally asleep. And all around you? So is the world. You wake with a grape stem in your hair and the distinct sensation that you've slept longer than intended. Someone has placed a light shawl over you, someone else has refilled your cup. The courtyard is brighter now, passed on, not quite morning proper. The coolness is still lingering, like a guest reluctant to leave. It's your last full day here, and you know it. There's a weight to it. Not heavy, not sad dash, just ... full, like the hush before a final verse. Your host insists on one more thing before you leave, a visit to the ice pit. Not a Yakhchāl this time, not the grand, cone-shaped monoliths you've come to recognize as the skyscrapers of cold. This one is more humble, a village version. A sunken ice pit, older than most maps, tucked behind a crumbling storage house and nearly forgotten except by those who never stopped using it. You follow him out of the courtyard and along a dirt path that winds between sun-bleached walls and fig trees still clinging to their leaves. A small stone arch marks the entrance. It looks like a cellar from the outside, unremarkable, modest, but when the door creaks open, you feel it again, that breath of cold, like the desert itself just exhaled in relief. Inside, darkness, earth walls, the quiet smell of time. And then your feet hit ice. Not crisp, not glimmering dirty ice, old and worn, but real. Chunks and crusted sheets buried in sawdust, packed down over months. It's the tail end of the supply, just enough to cool what's needed before next season's harvest. Enough to make one more bowl of ice cream, one more cooling compress, one more jug of sharbat for someone sick with summer. You squat next to it, touch it, it doesn't sparkle, doesn't impress. But it exists, here, in the middle of August, in a hole dug by hand, cooled by intelligence. The pit is lined with clay bricks and a layer of straw. Above, small air vents guide heat away and draw in colder nighttime air. You see a stack of empty ice molds tucked against the wall, metal trays shaped like shallow bowls. Some are dented, one is cracked and wrapped in cloth. They've served families for generations. Quirky tradition, during New Year festivals, people would gather around ice pits and carve small snow effigies, sheep, birds, even little human figures. They'd melt within hours, of course, but the act itself was symbolic. A blessing that fades is still a blessing. You step aside as the host's son enters, carrying a bowl of faluda mixed in noodles and a sweet syrup made of sugar and rosewater. He pours it into one of the molds, presses it carefully into the shallowest pocket of ice, and covers it. Within minutes, it begins to set. Historians still argue whether faluda predates sorbet or whether it evolved alongside similar dishes from China and India. Regardless, Persia embraced it like a long-lost sibling and gave it a starring role in its cooling canon. The boy offers you a bite from an earlier batch. The texture is odd at first, slippery, chewy, icy, but the flavor is instantly addictive. Sweet, floral, bright, it tastes like youth. Or at least like something worth chasing through every decade of your life. You sit near the edge of the pit, feet dangling just above the last snowbank. The boy tells you his grandfather used to guard this place like it was sacred. Not out of greed, but respect. He said, even the smallest ice takes work. You nod and suddenly you realize. That's been the story all along. None of this came easy. Not the Yakhchāl, not the breeze, not the saffron, not the clay. Every slice of coolness was earned, measured, and preserved like a precious family heirloom. Later, back at the house, preparations are underway for your send-off, not grand, just thoughtful. The family is making one final batch of ice cream. This time, you help from start to finish. You grind the saffron threads into powder, mix it with sugar, stir in boiled milk. You watch the churn begin, cranked by hand, paddled over ice, the metal bowl nested in a deeper stone container surrounded by a salty, slushy moat of frozen chunks. Someone sings, someone else tells a joke about a donkey who mistook the badger for a bakery chimney. The boy from the ice pit naps with a spoon still clutched in his hand. Eventually, the cream firms. You scoop it into a shallow copper tray and scatter pistachios over the top. No ceremony, no speech. Just ice served cold and deeply warm. The sun is lower now, casting long shadows across the baked earth and turning every courtyard wall into a canvas of warm light and quiet memory. Your bags are packed, or at least as packed as they can be when you've acquired exactly 6 types of pistachio-based snacks, 3 jars of saffron syrup, and a rolled-up rug that definitely wasn't in your original luggage plan. But you're not gone yet. There's one last stop. Not a structure, not a dish, not even a person. It's a path. Your host insists on walking you partway to the edge of town along a worn footpath that skirts the remains of an ancient ice caravan route. You hadn't noticed it before. It's not marked, not paved, not labeled. But it winds with purpose, following the contours of the hills in soft, looping curves. This is where the ice came in, and where knowledge went out. Camels once trod this path under blankets of goat hair, their cargo strapped and sealed in layers of straw and linen. They carried blocks of winter, cut from ice fields or harvested from the Yakhchāls, bound for palaces, villages, shrines, and bazaars. Some of those journeys took days, some weeks. And some never quite made it, but enough did to keep the system going for centuries. Quirky tidbit: one legend claims a certain caravan leader trained his camels to walk slower in hot weather, not just for their comfort, but to minimize melt loss. He allegedly timed their steps to a drumbeat and offered ice shards as rewards. Whether it's true or not, someone definitely wrote a poem about it. You reach a small overlook, a stone platform with a worn mosaic underfoot. From here, you can see the domes of the city in miniature. Windcatchers pierce the sky like sleepy sentinels, roofs glimmer with late sun. Somewhere, someone is undoubtedly stirring sharbat for guests, or nudging ice cream into shape with a copper spoon. Your host says nothing for a while, just watches. Then, in that same soft cadence you've grown used to, he says, "We don't have much here, but we have coolth." You smile, not cool, coolth, the old word, the right word. The noun of being cool, not just fashionable, but thermally victorious. Historians still debate when the word was lost from common English, or whether it ever really belonged. But here, in the dry hills of Persia, where ice was carved with bare hands and stored beneath the earth, it makes perfect sense. This whole world, every dome, every pot, every breeze that found its way indoors, it was built around coolth. Around the belief that you didn't need to conquer nature to survive it, you just had to listen. As you descend the path, the stones warm underfoot, you feel a kind of stillness, not silence, but completion. Like every slice of history you've seen has nestled itself into place. The Yakhchāl, the Connaught, the courtyard, the bowl of ice cream. The look on the child's face when the sherbet hit his tongue. All of it frozen moments. You pause for one last look back. And there, barely visible in the shadow of the hills, the last of the ancient ice trail gleams for just a second before the sun swallows it whole. But you know it's still there, just under the dust. Just like the ice. As we leave the deserts behind, as the Yakhchāl slip into shadow and the last droplets of melted ice slide quietly down ancient clay, you begin to drift. The heat fades first, like the end of a long breath, the weight of sun dissolves. The stone walls that held so firm all day are now your allies, radiating the cool memory of moonlight into your skin. You feel it in your fingertips, in your chest, in your shoulders that no longer carry the sun. The sound of water echoes faintly, maybe a comet beneath your feet. Or maybe just your breath, slow and rhythmic, winding through invisible tunnels of air. Every corner of this ancient world you wandered was built with patience, with clever hands. With the quiet understanding that survival doesn't have to be loud, it can be gentle. It can be made of breeze and shade and ice, tucked deep underground until the right moment. You lie back now in your own space, wherever you are, blanket pulled up, light dimmed, perhaps a fan humming nearby like a distant badger still whispering its wine song. And somewhere, in a courtyard lost to time, a bowl of faluda rests on a stone slab, a fig leaf curls in a dish of snow. A child sleeps, dreaming of frozen grapes. You are not in a museum. You are within history. And it, in turn, is holding you. Breathe in. Cool remains.